priest, a minister, and a rabbi walk into a bar. The bartender looks up and says, "What? Is this some kind of a joke?" We expect conflict when we hear of different religions coming together. Perhaps we expect humour as well. Today we're looking at the variety of faiths that exist in the world and asking the question, do they all point to one God? Christianity teaches us that there is one God, revealed through the Scriptures, incarnate in Jesus of Nazareth, who by his life and death revealed the way of salvation. But Christianity is not the only faith in the world. There are many others, and they all tell conflicting stories about God and about salvation. Now, it would be simple if, for example, all Muslims were crazed suicide bombers. We could say, that's fine, they're inspired by the devil, they're our enemies, and that's all we need to think about. But actually, there's a lot to be admired in Islam. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam to give away £1 in every 40 that you earn. And from my work as a prison chaplain, working with young offenders, I saw young lives changed by people finding faith in Christianity. But I also saw young lives changed just as significantly by becoming Muslims. And we were in India earlier this year, and in one day we visited a Hindu temple, a Sikh Gurdwara, a Muslim mosque, and a Baha'i house of worship. It was quite an exhausting day. But all of these religions worked to help the poor, to give food, to give education, to give inspiration and hope to their worshippers. So on the other side, can we simply say, as Christians, well, we're all on the same side, and that's fine. But as Christians, we believe in a Trinity. Muslims and Jews believe in the unity of God, although one calls God Allah, the other Yahweh. Buddhists don't believe in a God who is a being as such at all, but rather in the underlying principle that is beneath all existence. Hindus are a bit more complex because there's such a variety of belief within Hinduism, but generally they believe in many murtis or avatars or incarnations of one supreme being, Brahman. How can we say that all these contradictory claims and ideas are true? God cannot both be a personal God that comes as a Trinity and an impersonal force of existence, as Buddhists teach. Do these contradictory claims mean that other faiths are enemies of Christian truth? Well, before we look at our attitudes to faiths as such and more directly, I'd like us to take a moment to look at different theories of what truth is, because the whole idea of truth at first seems very simple, but actually is a little bit more complex than that. It's not as obvious as it appears at first sight. And this is on your handout, but you can take that away and look at it. You don't have to follow it while I'm talking. So first theory is the correspondence theory of truth, and this is what most people assume we mean when we talk about truth. Statements are true, and therefore because they correspond to facts. So every statement is either true or false. And everything that is true then can be said without metaphor. The correspondence theory struggles with the idea of truth that can be metaphorical. And this works for basic maths. 1 + 1 = 2. It's hard to imagine in any other universe that meaning anything different. But it starts to get complicated really quite early on. If I say, looking back, this is a table, and we have a table here in church, and yes, that's true, but actually there's slightly more complex views of the table. That's not the end of the truth. I can also say, this is an altar. If the children come and are playing after the service, they might see it as a house that they can play in, and if we really run out of cash, and times are hard and cold, we could look at it and say, this is firewood. And so the same thing can be a variety of different truths that are true about it. And how does the correspondence theory deal with what's really important in life? How does that deal with statements like, I love you? So metaphors, mixed ideas, or complicated ideas struggle with the correspondence theory. So the second theory then is the coherence theory. Coherence theory states that we recognises that we can't step outside of our language in order to compare what we're talking about, our language, our words, with the world, because all of our understanding is mediated by language. It's what we talk about. And in one sense, all language is metaphor. This sound table is a metaphor for that piece of wood back there. All language is metaphorical. Truth then can come from consistency. Reality is like a jigsaw that's put together, and if our statements match up, this is a table, we can eat, we can gather around it, we can share a meal. All of that makes a consistent picture of a table, and so we can say that that's where we come from. And science recognises this as how truth works. That's why we talk about the theory of evolution. If you could invent a time machine and go back in time, you'd see creatures at various stages in evolution, almost certainly. But it's a theory, it's putting together the facts that we have, the jigsaw of information. So moving on from that, the relativist theory then takes it slightly further. It's like the coherence theory, it's like a jigsaw, but says there's no box lid, there's no one pattern for truth. So the children can come and play on this, and this is their playhouse. Or we can, and that's their view that they put together with their jigsaw of information. We come and say it's a table because we eat round it, and so we have our jigsaw. There's no one way of looking at things. And what's true in one time and place, according to this theory, may not be true in another time and place. So the classic example for that is the Earth moving around the Sun. Back in time, people didn't have the astronomy skills that we have now. It was just assumed that the Earth was the centre and the Sun moved around, and so it was true, according to this theory, that the Earth was at the centre. But now, with more complicated information and more deeper knowledge of science, we can say no, the Sun is at the centre and we move around the Sun, and that is true. Now, it's not saying that everything is true, because now it wouldn't be true to say that the Sun moves around the Earth, because now we know we've more information, more pieces of our jigsaw that we've added in. Then finally, and briefly, I'm sorry I've taken a little bit too long on this part, the pragmatist theory, which put very simply is something is true if it works. And to say something is true then is to recommend it. So what is true brings hope, inspiration, goodness. I think there are problems with that idea, however, because what is helpful is not always true. I can think that I've won the lottery, and that will make me very happy indeed. I'll be skipping and singing, and I might start ordering things on the internet. But then when I go with my ticket, I never enter the lottery, but if I went with my piece of paper to lottery organisers and said, "Can I have my money please?" it would all come crashing down. So what is helpful is not always true. And what is true is not always helpful. We follow the example of Jesus, who was crucified. He was killed for what he believed in, and so it didn't work in that sense for Jesus. It wasn't true according to the pragmatist theory.